This is a special introduction to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Field Guide publication by Harvard Business Review Press as part of the Portuguese edition that's coming out in 4 volumes. Okay, Raj, thank you so much for sharing this moment with us. So I'd like to start this conversation with, a purpose story and how we got actually together to write this book, which was something I always remember because, we met a long time ago in 2010 at Conscious Capitalism Summit. And all of a sudden we started expanding and we came to Brazil. And from all the talks I was giving, people started asking me about, okay, let's put it in practice, how we do this. And we ended up writing a book in Portuguese, Fundamentals of Conscious Capitalism. It was sponsored and translated to Spanish so that we could go to Cuba and help entrepreneurs in Cuba to talk about the philosophy, but we didn't call it conscious capitalism for Cuba. We call it fundamentals of conscious business, so we don't get in trouble in Cuba, right? And I remember after the whole experiment in Cuba was very exciting with people from Mexico, conscious capitalism for Costa Rica, and you had actually something going on with Harvard Review Press. And then a couple of months later say, hey, instead of translating your book to English, why not join forces and heading to the bigger goal to have a better publication for Harvard. And that was something that I remembered so vividly for this purposeful journey of putting this all together, the Field Guide. What was your memory on that?
Yeah, I think it was to capitalize on your experience, first of all, as a consultant before even conscious capitalism, but then your experience using these ideas and deploying them and working with many companies to implement them. And as we were working on the Field Guide, I felt that it would be helpful to bring in a third voice as well. It was Timothy Henry and I, were primarily doing it at that point. And so we wanted the benefit of your experience as well as your experience having written that book. To ultimately, our purpose was really to have the best possible book that we could put together. And so I think that worked out well. You came to Boston a few times and we managed to get the project going. It was a little bit stuck until that time. And so we were able to make that happen.
And the beauty of that is that, Timothy has a full life in consulting. You have a strong presence in academia, and the combination with those 2 aspects and the entrepreneurial activity I was going through has actually brought a tremendous value to this publication. So I was very excited to see the whole thing actually unfolding when we start working together. Amazing. So here's the first question. How much, for all the work you have been doing and all the travel, how much has the corporate world advanced to make business more purpose-driven?
I definitely think it's becoming much more over time. Purpose is an idea that when we all started, I wrote Firms of Endearment in 2007, and it was about how world-class companies profit from passion and purpose. And that was the same year that Haley and Roy Spence published their book on purpose. And there were a couple of other books, but it was a relatively unknown idea, I would say then. And if I fast forward to today, it seems like it has become a mainstream idea that many, many companies are at least talking about it, paying lip service to it. Many consulting firms have now made it part of their practice, whether it's the big, Ernst & Young and KPMG and of course, McKinsey and others. So purpose has now become part of the common language around business. And it's no longer seen as sort of a radical idea. Now, how many of those are authentic and how many of those are real purposes? Or how many, as with any idea, when it happens, there are some people who really understand the gist of it and do it in an authentic way, and others who kind of latch on to what is the flavor of the month. And so I think there's a lot of purpose talk, a lot of people who confuse a tagline or an advertising jingle with a purpose. But at the same time, there is a lot of also authentic commitments to purpose that we have seen. So I would say it's moving more towards becoming a mainstream activity, becoming the default rather than the exception.
Great. So, and one of the things we have very strong that you brought into the field guide was the acronyms, how to actually, qualify, a great purpose. So can you share that with us? What's our acronym for purpose?
Yeah, so at some point, every acronym serves two purposes, right? So one is that it identifies the elements of what you're talking about, but the word itself should be meaningful, in connection to that particular issue. So I came to believe that ultimately all of what we do in the world, in business and even in other professions, is really about reducing suffering in some way and bringing more joy into the world. Right? And we can choose in what dimension of life we want to do that. And so you could be a lawyer, you could be a professor, you could be a doctor, you could be a business person, you could be anything really. But you can work in a way that increases suffering and reduces joy, or you can do the opposite, right? Which is what I define as healing, right? So healing to me means because we exist, there's less suffering in the world and there's more joy in the world and there's more healthy growth. There's a lot of unhealthy growth, I believe, more sort of compulsive growth in the world of business, especially. So that word healing had always resonated with me. And of course, I went on to write a book called The Healing Organization, but initially it was simply capturing the qualities of a great purpose and recognizing that, yes, healing actually is what it's ultimately all about. And so healing stands for the qualities of a great purpose. And you can look at your purpose if you're any company and say, to what extent do we align or match up with these 7 qualities? And it starts with heroic. H stands for heroic. A purpose should be something that is hard and challenging to realize. It should stretch us to the extremes of our capacities, right? Cannot be an easy thing. Otherwise, it's not really that meaningful. So again, it needs to be heroic. So when Henry Ford said that he wanted to produce cars for the multitude, that ordinary people who work in the factory should be able to drive the cars right home, that was a heroic purpose. When Steve Jobs talked about making a dent in the universe, or even when Bill Gates said we want a computer on every desk, right? These were visions, right? And of course, purpose is related to mission and vision. All of those things go together. But it has to be a heroic purpose. Whole Foods, about changing our relationship with food and the impact on our food system, on our bodies, as well as on the planet as a whole. So again, heroic. Second is evolving. E is for evolving. We change in our lifetimes as individuals, and companies go through their own life cycles. So the purpose does not have to be the same for the entire existence of your life, right? As a company or as a human. It can change dramatically or it can evolve. So as you grow and evolve, as the needs of the world change, your purpose can also evolve, right? Now, ideally, it should not be radically different. It should be an extension of what you're doing. But again, it has to be evolutionary. Nothing is fixed in the world, and therefore it has to be dynamic. The third A you can use in 2 ways. One is actionable, but I prefer aligning. So actionable basically says, it should be something that's not just words. It actually has implications for decision making. But the aligning to me is very critical. What does that mean? So if you don't have a higher purpose, that means you have a default purpose, which for business has been profit maximization, right?
Yeah.
Now, what happens when the business says that we're about shareholder value or profit maximization? Then every other stakeholder of the business starts to think in the same way, that the company wants to maximize profits, therefore I should also maximize my profits. So what does that mean for employees? I want to get paid as much as possible while working as little as possible. For customers, it means I want the lowest price on every transaction, and I have no loyalty to any company. I'll just go where I get the lowest price. Suppliers want the highest margin, right? Society wants the highest taxes. Everybody becomes a taker from that system. And no system can thrive if all of the component elements of that system are trying to extract from it. Every system thrives when all the participants and the components are actually contributing to the flourishing of that system, right? And when they do that, they will receive back far more than what they put in. But in this case, if you don't have that shared purpose, then it becomes a question of, well, how much can I take right? So what a purpose does, and along with purpose, of course, core values, it aligns everybody together. You're on the same side of the table. Whether you're a customer, whether you're an investor, whether you are an employee or a supplier or even society member, you all are rooting for the success of this enterprise because you believe in the purpose and you believe in the values. You're all on the same side of the table. Doesn't matter what hat you're wearing. You're all aligned together. You're pointing in the same direction, right? You have shared values. The fourth is love. Loving. And this word is common to many of our acronyms. The conscious businesses have to be rooted in love. In fact, everything we do in life, even as individuals, every decision, every action has to come from a place of love. Even if you're doing something very hard, something very might seem harsh, right? If you have to lay off people, for example, can you do that with love, right? So a purpose is rooted in love. That is the highest human emotion. It is basically a desire to see joy and flourishing in the world, right? And it's about elevating people's existence, not simply looking for a transactional relationship, but one that is founded on love, which is, as I said, the greatest driver of human ingenuity and human creativity and human passion is ultimately about love. The next is inspiring. The purpose has to get you out of bed on Monday morning and excited to go to work. You don't say, oh God, it's Monday. We have a statistic that heart attacks are 20% higher on Mondays, right? And our work is literally killing us. There's many other data points on that. But in a purposeful company with a great culture, people are excited about their work and they look forward. They don't say, oh, I have to go to my job. They say, I've got work to do. And there's a sense of passion and an urgency about it, right? So it's inspiring, right? Next is natural. N is for natural, that it is in harmony with nature, what we're trying to do, right? And it is natural for this company to have this purpose, right? In other words, it's not something that is generic, that could apply to any industry or any company, that it is in harmony with what this business is about and what this company is about, right? But very importantly, also aligned with nature, because too many cases we are trying to conquer nature, or we're doing something that is against nature. And ultimately, that is not a battle we can win, nor should we win. If we win, that means we have destroyed nature, right? We've done something harmful in the world. And the last is galvanizing. You could also say grounded, right? Galvanizing, again, is something that moves you to action. There's a sense of urgency about it, right? That we don't have infinite amount of time, right? We have to do this and do this quickly. So creating that sense of urgency, I think, is very important. So again, that's the acronym of purpose, healing.
Very interesting, because this acronym, or the qualities, or those components, or the strength from a great purpose come from those specific almost tenets, purpose tenets, right? Frederic Laloux talks about evolutionary purpose, which is in the acronym, and we're going to see love and all the other things, alignment with stakeholders, as we move forward on the next chapters or tenets of a conscious business. So it's amazing how encompassing, even now after 5 years, how the work that has been created through the field guide still actually is so strong in helping organizations to move forward on that, on all those 4 dimensions. Now, one interesting thing is sometimes we see purpose statements, they seem to be customer driven, and when you see a purpose that looks towards the customer, how can other stakeholders feel part of that broader journey of that? And one of the things you say, it's alignment. How do we align the stakeholders? If sometimes the purpose is there something that can be worked to actually make sure that the stakeholders, all other stakeholders, also see themselves part of that journey?
Yeah, so I think the purpose should be one that inspires and aligns with all stakeholders. Right? It shouldn't be too narrowly focused on one stakeholder, I believe. Right? So it should have relevance. And if you have a purpose that is a reflection of healing, it has all of those qualities, then in fact it will be something that is exciting to everybody. I know companies that are so customer focused that they actually abuse their employees in the process of the customer is always right, right? So again, they sort of enable customers to abuse their employees sometimes, right? So that is not okay, right? So again, the purpose of the company and the values of the company should be such that they are inspiring and relevant to all of our stakeholders. They have some meaning for everybody.
Wow, that's I think this is a great, thought-provoking or invitation for people to actually go deeper into the purpose field guide. So to all our listeners and readers, thank you for being part of this journey, believing in this idea, being an example of conscious practices, supporting the fierce urgency to accelerate the upgrade of organizations towards what we call a healing and more conscious ecosystem. So it connects with so many other things that you have been writing and publishing. So I'm so happy that we had a chance to share a bit of purpose for our community.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.